I was just looking for quick ways to get success. I was so interested in just owning something that shortly after college, I was actually counterfeiting.
What do you know now today about yourself as a business person that you didn't know back then that would have encouraged you to just take that leap?
If something happened crazily in our market and our business was to fail for some reason, getting a job is the last thing that's on my mind. They're paying us $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to bring a person in because it's that hard for them to find people that have the right skills.
All right, welcome back to the Roll with Steve podcast. I've got a special episode for you guys today because today I'm interviewing myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm interviewing my twin brother. Rob is here with me, and
Great.
You and I go pretty far back.
Yeah, you can
For
say
obvious
that.
reasons, back to the embryo.
35,
one could
36
say.
years, yeah.
I want to tell a little bit of your story today, but in a very unique way.
Okay.
Because on this podcast, we really focus on who's winning in areas that other people are losing and why that is, but really digging into the why behind the business side. Now, you and I have another podcast called Identically Opposed. We talk about all the issues. We talk about being biracial, growing up poor, how life has turned out well for us and what that's all been about. Get into politics, get into religion, talk about church a little bit. But on this podcast, I want to focus more so on the business side of you.
Okay.
Because you are an entrepreneur and you've always had the entrepreneurial drive inside of you, but you've gone more of a corporate route than I went in my life. And I want to uncover a little bit of why that is and what that journey was like for you to leave corporate America to go and start your own business.
Yeah.
Whereas my journey was more so get out of the military and jump right into entrepreneurship. You worked your way up and learned a skill set that I think is fascinating. Can we start with just a 2-minute intro on what it is that you do in business for someone, the elevator pitch for them to understand what you bring to the marketplace and what makes you unique?
Yeah. What makes me unique? Okay. So currently I'm the CEO and co-founder of HTD Talent, right? Which is a talent services company. You could call us a spin of IT staffing, but it's focused on early career, junior level technology talent where we hire them up front and we focus on closing the skills gaps that they have from college. So we train them on all the stuff that's missing from their college education in a computer science degree, because the goal is we're going to plug them into their careers. We want to accelerate them as best we possibly can. So they get all the theory from school, but they're missing the hands-on skills. We provide that and then help them to get their foot in the door to kick off their career with companies. So that's basically what Hire, Train, Deploy is. Personally, for me, I've had the chance to be in the space for 10 years now.
Yeah.
And it's really only existed in the US for a little bit more than 10 years. So as it's an emerging industry that companies are thinking about outsourcing their junior talent needs to other companies, and we're one of the growing companies in that space.
Yeah. Do you think because you've always been so entrepreneurial, and I even think back to when you were a kid thinking about multi-level marketings and business plans, and then we had a business together early on, lawn businesses.
Yeah.
But we also started our own recruiting company back in 2016.
Yeah.
That was its own journey we can talk about sometime. But do you think because you've always had the entrepreneurial bug that even when you were on the corporate side, climbing the ladder as a sales guy, turning into an executive, that you always knew, hey, I belong as the entrepreneur. I belong as the business owner. I'm on my pathway to get there. Like, do you feel like that's why you had that desire? Because you've always been in the kitchen cooking it up a little bit?
Yeah. If I look back on it now, I don't think when we even 5 years ago that I was thinking that my journey would end in being a business owner, right? And running businesses. I think when I switched over to the corporate side, I really saw myself just climbing the chain and getting into an executive role and maybe one day being a CEO.
But why is it that you had that thought process, having owned your own companies before and being entrepreneurial? What had you in the mindset of just climbing the corporate ladder and doing it the normal way?
Probably it felt like the safer path, right? And you think about it's just some of the businesses that we've had over the years. So many of which you know about, some might be new for you. I think about the lawn business we had growing up, probably the multi-level marketing businesses that you mentioned. I got into some of those during college. Neither of those were successful. Those lost money every single time. I was so interested in just owning something that shortly after college, I was actually counterfeiting. I started a business and we were making products in China. We were knocking off those, remember those life-proof cases? The ones that were waterproof?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We were getting those made in China and selling them on eBay back in the day when people were buying stuff off of eBay, until PayPal flagged our account and decided that we weren't supposed to be a business. So we lost money on that one too. I think
you were also into like the college books. You were going around hustling, getting people to sell you college books and making a lot of money doing that.
Part of that journey, I think, was I was just looking for quick ways to get success. I saw what I thought I wanted to be, which was have the big house, have a nice car, be respected. And coming out of the poorer background that we had, the motivation level was off for all of those, with the exception of like the lawn care business that we had growing up. That was great. We got some great experience from that. But the other businesses, the early businesses, were all based on how can I make a quick buck, even if it was illegal to do, right? We got a cease and desist letter from Adidas for knocking off soccer jerseys. Like it was just all the wrong ideas.
Shishis. We were doing a shishis,
right?
Okay?
We had all the wrong ideas, but there was this desire that we're just figure out somehow, some way, how am I going to make it? How am I going to change my situation? How am I going to be able to actually kind of social climb? And this is when my career shifted into the space that I'm in today. And that started to give me ideas on, wow, this business is not all that difficult. Companies need people. We're providing those people and they're paying us $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to bring a person in because it's that hard for them to find people that have the right skills. And this was where you and I set out and said, while you were still in the military, why don't we just start a little staffing firm on the side?
Yeah.
Let's find a way to go make some money, And it was a space that I knew that at the time, I thought I had expertise in. Looking back on it now, I realized just how much we didn't know.
Yeah.
We had no clue what we were getting ourselves into. But that was the first like legitimate business that we decided to step into, and we filed for an LLC. And it was tricky because we had to do this while I was still working another job.
Yeah.
And so there was
doing kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that business, I always tell people, hey, we made almost $100K in the first week that we started taking in revenue. Placed 3 people with the same company. One was 30 grand, one was 35 grand, one was $25,000.
Yeah.
One of them ended up falling out.
Yeah.
But that first week was like $100K, and we chased that feeling the whole rest of the way. You didn't know if you knew the industry well enough to go take that step. We just kind of blindly jumped into it, made almost $100K in a week worth of billings.
Yeah.
What were you thinking at the time then? Like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur now. Like, I don't need this other job that I'm making $150,000 on.
Yeah.
What went through your mind?
I think a part of me was ready to quit my job and like, let's just go do this thing. But
$100K a week. I mean, that's going to be, let's see. I was at $5 million.
$5 million. I believe we did that math and we tried to make it work. Right. But, we quickly realized one of those deals fell through eventually, so we never got paid for it. So we made like $60K, $65K, which is still great over the course of a week, but that week turned into a month and we didn't see any more revenue. And then that next month, we probably only had like maybe $10,000 or $12,000 of revenue that we had. So we saw that quick hit of what it could look like, but there wasn't enough of that faith that we had it really figured out. Now, looking back on it today, I should have just jumped ship, because that company would have been successful. And especially during the time period that we were in, where spending was loose, interest rates were pretty low and fair. Like there was going to be a path to success. It took me from that point, probably that was like around 2016. It wasn't until 2022, so 6 years later, when I actually quit my corporate job and stepped away and started like the real business that you invested in and I invested in, and we really started to like, let's go big with this thing. But we could have started it back then. We would be better off today if we had. But I was afraid to take that step because there was some safety in the job. At the time, I was probably making like 120, 130, right? In 2016, maybe a little bit more than that. But my income was growing every single year.
Yeah.
That's hard to walk away from.
It is. And 120K to you now is chump change.
Yeah.
Compared to what you're bringing in now. And even if you'd stayed climbing the corporate ladder, it'd still be chump change compared to what you'd be making now. But you talk about that fear of stepping away from that guarantee.
Yeah.
And you and I both know people who have those golden shackles of, I'm already making six figures. I've got a family. I've got a dog. I've got responsibilities. I can't leave this behind to go jump ship. But I find what you said there really interesting, that, hey, back in 2016, I should have just taken the leap then.
Yeah.
What do you know now today about yourself as a business person that you didn't know back then that would have encouraged you to just take that leap?
It's easy to make the statement now, looking back on it, because I understand the determination. I understand, like, I've now seen the evidence of, like, no matter what gets thrown at us, we're going to figure it out, right? I've got this attitude that I can figure anything out. A lot of times I don't figure it out until I'm forced to. And that's what I've seen for myself. So when I look back to 2016 and I say, man, I wish someone would have pushed me off the dock into the water, because I would have figured out how to swim. I know that now based on what I've seen. It would have been scary, right? But that's part of what being pushed into the deep end does, right? The strongest are going to survive. So I know that things would have worked out, but I think it's just determination, it's grit, but it's also, probably most importantly, even though I didn't know all the things I didn't know, I look back on it now and say, I knew enough. I knew enough to get started. And that's really all that mattered. We had customers who were willing to pay us when I was doing this semi-part-time, right? They were willing to separate themselves from their dollars for the value that we were providing. That's already more than enough. How many businesses have you heard of that start where people not only put their own money into it, but take on investors and never make a dollar, right? They don't know how to get that first customer.
Yeah.
So looking at it now with what I know today, like, we already had the signal that we were providing enough value to the marketplace for someone to pay us. And that's enough for you to go ahead and take that chance. Here's the other thing I'll say. The longer I waited in my career and the more that my corporate income increased and my life comfort level increased, I realized the less likely it was that I would ever step away.
Yeah.
That I would ever start this thing. And so I felt like in 2022 at 32, 33 years old, like, this is my last chance to actually get out of here before I take on that next role where the perks are just too good. The pay's just a little bit too sweet to be able to go ahead and bet on myself now. The risk reward is just not there anymore.
I mean, I know so many people, we have this conversation around them making really, really good money, and they've got this idea and this dream, and they feel stuck in their job. But, like, this is all the stuff I was supposed to aspire to. Like, I'm already making the money that I ever wanted to. I can support my family. We have a good life, a decent life. We have the cars we want, the houses that we want. But they feel stuck, thinking, I got to do this for 30 more years and just keep on showing up and grinding this out. Is this the existence that I was promised? And it strikes me that you got to a point where you were willing to let that go for the dream that was there. And so for all those people who are out there who are in a job that they don't really like, but that they're doing very well in and they're finding classic success, what do you say to those people about what you found when you took the leap and put life into your own hands?
Yeah. Probably the first thing is that it's less of a leap than you think. Because when I finally put things into the perspective of what's my actual worst case scenario here, right? What if this thing is a massive flop in 6 months? I know how much money I'm putting into it, right? You were putting money into it, right? But at the end of the day, like, while I don't want you to lose your money, like, that doesn't change anything for my personal situation if this business flops, right? So when I kind of came to the realization that, okay, all right, this feels really scary to step away from my career, but I'm also in my early 30s. I'm relatively early in my career. If I'm literally thinking that I have to do this for 30 years, like, this is the existence that I've chosen, what's the difference if I take 6 months and I try this venture and maybe I burn $50,000 or $100,000, right? So I'm a little bit poorer and I've probably lost a little bit of my dignity, right? That I'll have to work on getting back. But that was my worst case scenario, was I in 6 months go back, crawling back to a job and say, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do. But at least if that was the story, at least I tried. At least I gave it my best. And I tried and I failed. And now I can live with my 25 or 30-year career left. And I'll put money into my 401k and my backdoor Roth IRA, and I'll save for my kids' college fund, and life will work out just fine. It's just not going to be big. It's not going to be the grandeur that I had imagined. But that was literally the worst case scenario. And I think when I finally started to realize that, it's like, what the hell? Like, let's give this thing a go.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing that, people like you, other entrepreneurs that I know, is my mindset is so different now, where if something happened crazily in our market and our business was to fail for some reason, getting a job is the last thing that's on my mind.
Yeah.
That's not plan B, C, or D.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not ashamed to go back to work in that situation if 3 or 4 other things actually fail. But I've got ideas for days. We've done this before. We could do it again, right? Find some way to provide value to a marketplace. In this case, it was in an area of expertise for me, but find another way to provide value and go do that, right?
It's so funny how people go through these stages when they think about entrepreneurship, about what the backup plan is. If you're really, really good at your job and your job wants you and other companies want you, best believe, although it may be humbling, you go back to your company or any other company that wants you and say, hey, I started a business, it failed, I want to come and work for you. They want you because they got a lot of shitty people that work for them. You're one of the good ones. They want you to come in back. So you have that backup plan. But I like to look at the phases of entrepreneurs and what the backup plan is. Because first-time entrepreneurs who are 6 months in, when they're not sure the business is going to work out or not, they say, hey, the backup plan is to go get the job I had before. Like, I'm really good at that. I can go make the same money I made right now. Right around that 1 or 2 year mark of entrepreneurship, they say, the backup plan is now just starting a different business. Because I've realized that if I've got a good offer in the marketplace, a way to distribute it to people, I'm really good at this job of selling to people or delivering on this, adding value. If it's not in this industry that I'm in, I'll just do it somewhere else. And so it sounds like it gave you a lot of confidence a couple years into the journey that, hey, I'm always going to be this entrepreneur now and be a high income earner because I choose that because, hey, I know how to make money now. I know how to provide value to people. Is that what kind of went through your head?
You think of starting a business as this big complicated thing, and it really isn't. If you're doing something that other people need and your price is in range, your quality is high, like you're going to get business, right? I understand that now, and that's why I do believe you're absolutely right. It has completely shifted my mindset, because if for some reason this idea doesn't work over time, there's not as much of a market for it, there is something else that I can do. And now I have all these lessons learned that I can apply to the next thing. I can make sure that that's actually going to be successful, or I can give it a much better shot than what this first business actually had. Things are going great from that standpoint, right? But the next time, I'll save myself 6 months in getting to market and seeing our first revenue, or even bringing on investors, understanding what other people are willing to fund now that we have investors who are involved in our business, and seeing the way that they think about these things and putting the different pieces together. Like, I don't have to necessarily put in $100,000 of my own money the next time. And there's also this sense, I think some people look at and they feel like, if they're an entrepreneur and they fail, that venture capital or private equity will look at them and say, oh, that's a failed entrepreneur. That's not been my experience in how they look at those people. They look at those people as someone who's learned some really valuable lessons with someone else's money. But if that person has the grit and determination to keep going, they're interested in those entrepreneurs who have failed before.
They're almost
who know why they failed. And know the reasons that it happened, and now know what to avoid.
More investable. Almost more investable. See, people that have jobs think they understand entrepreneurship and that they need to go out there and find success. And so they think about the whole thing as this big complex system of going out and finding success. And they don't realize that, hey, you're way overthinking it, because so much of what you're going to look for can be found out when you're in the ditch. Just hop in and start doing it. If you've got a skill set you can give to people and value to add to the marketplace, like, you can go and make that happen. It's actually relatively simple, just like you said. I think one of the interesting things about your story is that if I were to tell you that when you left your day job and started your business, you'd be sued 2 days later, would you still have taken the leap? That's a rhetorical question, because my real question is, that's your story.
Yeah.
What happened there? Like what was that like to go through in the worst possible scenario of, not only do I have a new business with zero revenue trying to figure this out, but I'm also now being sued on like day 2 of this business.
Yeah. We got a real quick crash course in just how the civil court system works, because stepping away from a current employer, we had a non-compete, right? And even though we didn't do anything to violate that non-compete, myself and my co-founder, the company that we left came after us immediately and asked the court to shut us down, asked for an injunction immediately. And I mean, that was scary. You know, I remember the uncertainty. A part of me is like 2 weeks in, like, well, we tried. we tried. Let me just go get a job. You know, maybe they'll still take me back. They'll close the lawsuit and take me back. But we got a quick crash course in how these things go. And it was a lengthy process. The court initially decided in our favor that we were not going to be shut down, but the claim was still there, so we had to respond to it. This was $1 billion corporation that was coming after us. And so if they spent $100,000, $200,000 just making life difficult for us so that we couldn't compete with them in the future, that was enough. That was okay for them. So I think it's kind of like we kind of went through a quick test early on, and you realize if you have the balls for this space or not. Because looking back on that now, just a few years ago, I don't even look back at them and say, man, that was so mean what they did to us. They're just playing the game.
Yeah.
They're playing the game. And the game of business is they were concerned that after our non-competes were up 12 months later, that we were going to take their customers. Well, what we had to do for our part of the game was to survive for 12 months, right? And when we did survive for 12 months, we have been successful in taking on some of their customers. Absolutely. Like, that's a part of the game. So they're just playing defense, and we had to go ahead and play defense on our side. It worked out for us, but it was a long process. And quite frankly, we ended up settling with them. We paid them money at the end of the day, even though they had no real claim to file upon.
And you won the lawsuit.
We won the lawsuit.
It was thrown out.
It was
and
thrown
yet you
out.
Still ended up settling,
We
which is
filed-
something that people don't know about our court system.
We filed a motion to dismiss about 6 months in after they had failed to be able to prove their claim. And the judge granted the motion to dismiss. He found for the defendants with damages. And we're like, great, we just won. We might even get our legal fees paid
Let's
for
go
as a part
sue
of this.
them now.
This is
Okay.
great. 2 weeks later, they refiled the case. And you learn this lesson that in civil court with business, it's understood that you're going to have a chance to refile at least one time. They filed the exact same case. They didn't care. It was about trying to bleed us dry. Once they didn't get us shut down in the first 2 weeks, the next game was bleed them dry. We're not sure if they have enough money to be able to fight this, and maybe we can push them out of business that way. And so, begrudgingly, our lawyers advised us that just pay them.
It's just cheaper to
Just pay them and make them go away. And I think that maybe the lesson that was learned there was a really good lesson in just business risk. Because I'm like, no. We're not settling this. They're wrong. We're in the right here. We didn't do anything wrong. They're besmirching our good name amongst, like, this is a public lawsuit. And at the end of the day, I think our lawyer told us, look, you're going to settle with them. The number that they're asking for, it's a known number. But if you go to trial, the cost, the legal fees, everything that's going to go on, that's an unknown number, and there's no guarantee that you're going to win.
Yeah.
Because you could have a bad day in court, and all of a sudden you've lost now, and who knows what that judgment's going to look like.
Yeah.
So if you take the known number today, wash your hands of this thing and move on. And this is the way that he really convinced us. He said, look, you've already won. They didn't shut you down, and you've made it a year into your business. You can go do whatever you want now. You won this suit. Separate yourself from this little bit of money and call it a day. Another lesson learned.
Still hurts to pay them that settlement money. Right? Just because you want to stick it to them. Yeah, I'm starting this business. I'll tell you this, as the investor in the business, when you get sued on day 2, there's 2 things that happen. Number 1, you think about, hey, how much is this going to cost? But number 2, more importantly, you think, all right, I bet on the right guys, because their company doesn't want them competing against them.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
worried about this.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be a success. If you can make it through the lawsuit, and I think I try to encourage you guys all the way throughout, just fight, and just keep on moving forward the business, even though it does tie your hands behind your back of trying to raise more money when you're under current litigation as it goes forward. I find the whole thing like extremely interesting of how you had to fight through that and come out of this. We talked about this a little bit this morning, and I want to introduce this element. When you're in that lawsuit and you're going back and forth with an attorney, you're in a negative headspace about someone who's suing you, and you hop and talk to the attorney, you call me, you call your co-founder, you're having these conversations about how could they do this to us, and this isn't right, and how do we respond to this, how do we defend ourselves in this. What you're not doing is thinking about, hey, all day long I'm head down focused on growing this business and taking this solution out to the market. And even though you had to pay the settlement, when you remove yourself from that negativity, where you're not having the talk with the lawyer or having the conversations with me or others about that case, and you're just talking about growing the business, I find it very interesting that the moment that came to an end, you got into a positive space and the business sold, 2 months later?
Yeah.
After that happened?
After that,
We had suitors coming to get you. Talk to me about that process of being in the positive mindset, not having the negativity, and finding business success very quickly on the back end of that.
I remember how much of a thing it was for us. We were talking about this every single day. And it is really wild to think about how quickly that shifted. As soon as it was done and over with, we just grit our teeth, write the check, send it off. This thing is done. And now that distraction is completely gone. We didn't realize how much time it was actually taking up of our day, talking about this, mulling over it, losing some sleep at night over it, that kind of stuff. The lesson learned there is just being able to step away, like realize what's a big deal, what's going to matter this time next year, what's not going to matter this time next year, and like where are you actually going to put your focus, and focus on things that actually move the needle. But you can have all these ideas of things that are going to move the needle if you have all these distractions that are stopping you. That can be a real issue that gets in the way. So it was a momentous decision for us looking back on it to be able to say, you know what? No, we're done with this thing. We're going to drive forward and we're going to focus on the future now. And no more upon the past.
I think it's so interesting how that all plays out. All right, final question here. I want to close things up talking about positioning.
Okay.
And what I think a lot of people who have jobs don't really understand about entrepreneurs and how they position, because I have seen life after life changed and net worths change from the tune of nothing going to millions by merely positioning as a business owner versus being an employee of a company. And the thing that's most striking to me about your story, or one of the things I find the most striking, is that by making that decision to jump to being a business owner, you remove the ceiling that was above you. And all of a sudden now you go from a conversation of talking about building a net worth that's going to give you a suitable retirement and a good life for your kids to saying, hey, I might make $50 million or $100 million doing this business. Talk to me about how you position yourself for that. And was that a cognizant thing in your mind of removing that ceiling?
Yeah. I think it just kind of happens, right? Because when I came into starting this company, right, like I was coming out of it as a former sales leader, right? I had been a salesperson myself, moved into sales leadership, and then now kind of de facto CEO of a company. But I still thought of myself as like, man, I'm the sales leader. I'm driving sales. That's what's going to take to make this business happen. And you kind of like wake up one day when you realize, okay, the company's growing a little bit. We have employees. Like where it starts to hit you is you see how other people actually like treat you a little bit differently, right? If I go on a meeting with one of our sales reps today and I'm brought along and they say, hey, our CEO, he's here local to Charlotte, he wanted to come in and meet you all. And you just see the difference in terms of how you're received there. And they're like, wow, you made time for this? Like, you must have a crazy schedule. I'm like, no, this was the most important thing I had going on today. But like it's in their mind, they think, okay, we've got a growing business here. The CEO's here. Like, wow. Yeah. Like the schedule must be crazy, but you made time for this. So they just look at you differently. And then from that point, you start to realize, wow, like, okay, man, the situation has completely changed.
Yeah.
It's totally
It's funny
different.
how that happens. And unfortunately, we don't have any more time. I want to cut it off there. But I think it's great to have a familiar face on the podcast. And for anyone who wants to see more conversations with you and me, we do have Identically Opposed podcast, new episodes on YouTube every single Saturday at 7 a.m.
Yes.
weekly Eastern time. And we do that podcast. And it's good to have you here talking about the business side, but come see us talk about some of the other elements of life on that podcast. But it's good to have you here.
Love it. Love what you're doing.